thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Sam Nutt. I work at the London Office of Technology and Innovation, and today we're delighted to have colleagues from faculty we've been working with to look at AI opportunities in housing services. So if we go to the next slide. So a little bit of housekeeping for today. So the webinar is being recorded. I know everyone will ask. So the webinar is being recorded and we'll be sharing it afterwards, as well as slides to everyone who joined today. Please do keep your microphones muted. My colleague Esther will be hot on the mute button, but it makes everything run much smoother for us if we can keep the microphones muted. And lastly, I think please do use the chat function, do introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining from, and also make sure during the presentation you're using the chat to ask any questions of us, maybe answer questions that people might have, and so forth, and that can be a really rich, hopefully a rich vein of discussion in the chat that we can then also call upon for the Q&A section. For a bit of background on LOTI, I know we've got lots of people joining today from outside of the LOTI community, which is great to see. LOTI is a membership-driven organisation comprised of 28 of the boroughs of London and the Greater London Authority and London councils. If we go to the next slide, LOTI, we work collaboratively, so across all of our members in line with their ambitions to use data innovation and technology to help them be high-performing organisations and improve services and tackle London's biggest challenges together, of which housing services is one of those priority areas that our members have identified for us that they would like us to work on in LOTI. So the reason we're here today in LOTI and with our colleagues from faculty, if we go to the next slide, Sona, is we were very interested collectively, I suppose, as a community and also as an organisation, LOTI, in what are the actual potential opportunities for using artificial intelligence in housing services. Obviously, everyone is here. We've all heard the hype and the excitement around ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, and especially if you work in the public sector, I'm sure everyone in the call has been in many conversations in the last 18 months about how AI is the solution to all of our huge problems. I think we're being told that by lots of people, we've been told that by suppliers, we've been told that by all different parts of our organization. But what we really wanted to do in LOTI is try and cut through some of that hype and really understand what are the tangible opportunities for using AI in housing services, with, as I say, housing services being identified by our members as one of those priority areas for transformation where we know there are incredible demands on services, we know there's limited resources to meeting some of these demands, and so therefore we know as a sector we need to be much better, much more innovative in how we design and deliver some of those services. Given all of that, we know also as a sector in local government, we're not always the best and the fastest at adopting some of the opportunities when it comes to new and emerging bits of technology. And that's why I think it was really important to us that we could partner with an organization like faculty to help deliver some of this research, thinking really about what are the problems that we want to solve as a sector, and then working out where are the good opportunities for some of this new emerging technology. So that's sort of the context for why we've done some work on this and we've been working with faculty. And then I'm delighted now to pass over to the faculty colleagues who will be presenting and sharing some of our research over the next half an hour or so. As I say, please do put your questions in the chat, and thank you again for joining.
Great, thank you so much, Sam. And I think before we start, I'll just do a quick intro and hand over to Sona as well to give an intro. So my name is Thais. I'm an associate here at faculty in the government and public services team. So I've been working on this research project with LOTI. So I'll hand over to Sona as well to introduce herself.
Thanks, Thais. Hi, everyone. I'm Sona. I'm a product manager at faculty. I have spent some time working on various government digital services over the past 7 years or so. And yeah, have really enjoyed working on this AI opportunities project with LOTI.
Great, thanks so much. And quick sort of agenda, doing intros now, and then we'll do a very quick grounding on what is AI, just to ensure we're all on the same page, some of the terms that will be in the rest of the presentation. And then we'll talk about the project and the methodology for that, which I think it will be a really useful, reusable product that others can implement in their own work, scoping out AI opportunities. And then we'll get into the kind of the meaty bit, talking about the opportunities we prioritised, and hopefully time for some interesting discussion. So the next slide, please. So quick intro to faculty and who we are. We're a data specialist, not a broad sort of digital agency or management consultancy. We are veterans of data projects in the public sector with over 50 productionized data services under our belt. They're helping public servants make better decisions. We've worked with like a series of organisations within local government and also central government, and on a wide variety of projects also in the private sector. So I probably won't flesh this out too much, but we are really passionate about making a difference. And you know, we've worked with LOTI on the rough sleeping project, which some of you may be aware of, and we're really passionate about ensuring there's efficiency and value of money of operational teams and strategic policy decisions. And we're really excited to be playing a role in LOTI's overall mission to build momentum around practical digital and cultural change in local authorities. So we'll kick off with a quick sort of what is AI and some of the key terms that you might have heard of already. So you're going to hear so many different definitions of AI, but it's a very broad concept referring to the ability of machines or computers to perform complex tasks and exhibit human-like intelligence. This can mean anything from, you know, voice recognition to robotics. And so AI doesn't specify which exact technology is used, but rather refers to the complexity of the intellectual task that is being performed automatically by a machine. So within AI, there's ML, or machine learning, which is a subset, and it refers specifically to the technologies that allow computers or machines to learn from data. So you can say that machine learning is the implementation of AI that is using algorithms to identify patterns, anomalies in large volumes of data, and then teaching itself to perform a task automatically. You know, a classic one would be your Netflix suggestions, you know, automatically telling you what you should watch next because it's learned from all the data you've given it about what you're into. And then another term is data science, which is quite important. It's an umbrella term that refers to the application of statistical methods to analyze data. And this refers to the collection, management, and analysis of large amounts of data. And a data scientist can use machine learning, but there are also lots of other applications. Next slide, please. And although AI is a broad concept, it has sort of two key parts to it, and our opportunities span both, and often combine both as well. So traditional AI, or you know, machine learning, narrow AI, might have many names, is a collection of methods used to identify patterns in data. It's best used for structured data problems and mission critical processes, and it's usually trained for sort of narrow purposes. Those things it's trained on is things like identifying trends by looking at lots of data, finding patterns, spotting anomalies, and you do usually need to use lots and lots of data to get, you know, the best insight from that. And on the other side, we have generative AI, which is, you know, we might know that as your ChatGPT and your sort of chatbots. They use the same foundations as traditional narrow AI, but they tackle the shortfall in quite of like not having often enough data. So it also learns to complete tasks and can do more than one thing that like a narrow tailored model could. So generative AI usually contains structured and accessible information, and they can be used to create synthetic and novel outputs. And I think the key thing here is that they are best for sort of tasks where human interaction problems, where sort of small errors are okay. So we wouldn't want to kind of put them in very mission critical places where them, occasionally getting things wrong could have a large impact. Great. I'll now hand over to Sona to get into the meat of the project.
Thanks, Thais. So we're quite keen to have an interactive element to this webinar. And our first question to the audience is around your perceptions or your attitudes towards AI. So where do you sit on the spectrum, on this spectrum on the screen? So one is that you are very worried about it and the risks and implications. On the other end of the scale, you are very excited about all the opportunities and the innovation. And somewhere in the middle is that you think that we should proceed with caution. So pop your number in the chat, and it would be great to understand the audience's feelings towards AI right now. Excellent. Brilliant. Seeing lots on the upper end of the scale, which is great. If there is anyone in the audience who is worried, don't worry. We will go through some deployment considerations. We do take the kind of risks and implications of AI quite seriously at faculty, and we've given a lot of thought to how to approach AI with a responsible way. Okay, thank you for that. So the objective of this project was to identify AI opportunities for housing services. And just to flash these up in the first instance and kind of show you the outcome up front, we will go into these in much more detail later. But the 6 opportunities we prioritized were around optimizing resource planning and forecasting risks and their implications, automated responses to maintenance requests, extracting and summarizing maintenance requests at the front door, preventative maintenance of properties, including boiler maintenance, an opportunity around mold and damp detection and a predictive forecasting tool, and then an opportunity where we can basically use the data from smart sensors and IoT devices better for monitoring certain faults. So we will come back to these, but I want to go into a bit more about the methodology we used to come up with these. So how did we get to these 6 prioritized opportunities? Well, we were quite keen to take a user-centered approach with our methodology. So we performed 6 quite in-depth interviews with housing teams across 4 London boroughs. We sort of interviewed them and really got under the skin of their pain points, their challenges, their user needs, and their workflows, and how they organize themselves, and what takes long and what could be more efficient. So we really got a rich data set to work from. We then produced a long list of ideas. That long list was then scored using a prioritization framework that I'll go into on the next slide. All those opportunities were scored by stakeholders in the housing sector in London boroughs. And then based off of those scores, which were essentially around value of the opportunity and feasibility of the opportunity, we created this list of 6 prioritized use cases. So we had a fairly rigorous and systematic methodology to get to these 6 opportunities. Just a bit more about the prioritization approach, because we know that a lot of organizations do find it tricky to figure out which idea to pursue and which use cases to prioritize. And so we've seen this methodology work quite well across organizations. Essentially, we identified 20 use cases per service area. So the idea of identifying your use cases, a long list, is a good first step. And then plotting those ideas or scoring those ideas against value and feasibility. So in terms of value, the criteria there was that this opportunity should speed up process or reduce human effort, that it should improve service and experience for users, It should be a scalable solution, scale it to other services, and that the benefits can be realized quickly. On the feasibility side, we were thinking about data readiness and tech infrastructure readiness, the ease of implementation plus the ease of development, and then ease of validation plus ease of maintenance. And so scoring against these giving a value score and a feasibility score with these criteria in mind helps you sort of plot your use cases and figure out which ones you should do now, do next, do later, or not do it at all. I talked about deployment considerations. So like I said, we do take a responsible AI approach, and I know that LOTI cares about that a lot as well. So 5 sort of high-level deployment considerations for AI in housing services. So things that you should think about. I won't go through every single point here, but at a high level, data privacy and security. That is of utmost importance. We really care about users' personal data and being responsible about that data. Of course, there are opportunities to use health data in housing as well. But essentially, you need some robust security measures, data transparency, opt-in measures, and really give good consideration to cybersecurity as well. In terms of costs and capacity, so thinking about the resource pressure and burden on staff, where the value generation will be and the time it will take for this to be realized. For skills and capability, so with any AI opportunity, thinking about the risks of exacerbating the digital divide. We know that not everybody is comfortable with digital services. So it's really important to bear that in mind when you're designing solutions. Similarly, the need to upskill staff and users where you've got internal opportunities like many of the ones that we've identified. It's not, we wouldn't assume that obviously you design with user-centered design in mind, but actually investing in the time to skill and train staff is really important. From a data and technical readiness perspective, thinking about the availability and the quality of the data that you need to build that solution, whether you have access to it and whether you can share it, the infrastructure availability and maturity, and then also, of course, the technical readiness and organizational culture for deploying any AI solutions. And then finally, ethical considerations. There's lots of discussion and debate around this with AI at the moment. But essentially making sure that you don't, or you try and reduce the level of bias in your models, and making sure that you're really testing for that bias. And also making sure that there are questions over autonomy, consent, decision-making, and then ethical concerns of profit-driven systems and social welfare. We wouldn't want to, I think it's just something that you have to bear in mind when thinking about AI solutions for areas like housing and social care. So just to go into detail of these prioritized opportunities, first up, from the research that we did, I wanted to share the top 5 problems or pain points that emerged from our interviews. So number 1 was this idea of a reactive approach to maintenance. So the current reactive nature of the work is thought to be inefficient, where opportunities to anticipate risk or prevent further damage or address properties in the same area are missed. So really trying to take a more proactive approach would be is a theme that's really come through in all of our opportunities. The second problem or pain point was an overwhelming volume of tenant queries and complaints. So there were lots of challenges around the workflow around digesting, prioritizing, and responding to tenant complaints, and the manual nature of reading lengthy complaints it does place a heavy burden on users. The third pain point was around managing follow-ups from repairs, and a lot of the problem here was this sort of disconnect between what the tenant considers to be a a repair done and what a contractor considers to be a repair done. So a difference in the standards or the acceptance criteria of a repair being fixed, and that can create a large volume of follow-up queries from residents. Number 4, inefficient allocation of resources. So managing contractors can be quite complex, and sometimes their assigned time isn't being used for maximum value. And number 5, the inconsistent, disparate, or manual data collection, retrieval, and subsequent alerts. So just the whole data kind of ecosystem being very tricky to work with. Data retrieval tends to be a manual process, which limits the ability to provide automated alerts to tenants. And a holistic, user-centered approach to monitoring alerting would be much more beneficial. It'd be really interesting to hear in the chat if any of those pain points resonate, whether you would add any of your own. So the first opportunity that we discovered or that we identified was around optimizing resource planning and forecasting risks and their implications. So the user problem here was that maintenance needs to reduce delays in repair work. This is very difficult when multiple contractors are involved and when demand increases, for example, in winter, but supply is short due to a lack of forward planning. And that forward planning is hard because we're constantly in this reactive cycle that is difficult to get out of. So in terms of the solution, this would be a predictive time series forecasting model that predicts likely maintenance loads for the coming few weeks. And this would be based on historical complaints and maintenance data. In terms of deployment considerations, you'd have to think about data sharing agreements, making sure that data is accurate and up to date, dependency on suppliers and sensor suppliers, feedback loops within the tool. The solution might be more suitable for some boroughs over others, given their access to data or digital maturity. And then the communication flows between residents need to also be very well designed. So the impact of this opportunity was scored as high, technical feasibility medium, and then the timeline we've identified between quick wins and long-term solutions, and this was considered to be a quick win. Opportunity number 2, regular and automated updates and responses to maintenance requests. So the user problem here was that housing maintenance teams struggled to manage the volume of maintenance complaints and follow-on queries, and tenants expect responses at speed. The opportunity summary, so the solution would essentially be an LLM-based chatbot interface that could deal with the volume of requests in an immediate, customized, and automated way. It would be trained on a database of information, FAQs, and tenant history. We haven't included all the details of the solution here, but they are in the report, which you will receive a link to. But the LLM chatbot would also connect to human agents as well when the query was a bit more complex, or indeed if the tenant just wanted to talk to a human, that link would definitely be there. In terms of the deployment considerations, again, digital inclusion and accessibility, and making sure that the chatbot is designed in an accessible way, testing for bias and safety, potentially language translation if people want to chat in their own language, and then multimodal aspects as well. So some people might prefer to communicate by voice, others by text. So having that multimodal aspect to the chatbot is really important as well, and feasible, more importantly. So high impact, high feasibility, and also a quick win because the technology is largely exists. Just speeding through these, conscious of time and want to allow enough time for discussion, extracting and summarizing maintenance requests. So the user problem here was that borough maintenance teams spend a lot of time on resources on managing how to respond to tenant queries. A lot of time is spent on pulling the correct information needed for responses from various systems and databases. The solution would be a generative AI solution where a maintenance query received would be inputted into a summarization tool for the caseworker to use, and that would summarize queries and produce templates for responses as well. Some of the deployment considerations, robust testing for accuracy and comprehensiveness, If there are handwritten notes, we could use computer vision to ingest those and read those. Of course, the explainability of the model is important, and then just making sure that the kind of user testing and workflow integration is properly designed as well. And again, this was a high impact, high feasibility, and quick win opportunity. I'll pass over to Thais to talk through the remaining 3 opportunities.
Yes, thank you. So the next few are all very much about predicting maintenance risks and sort of forecasting tools, which utilizes a lot of anomaly detection type of AI. So this one scored very highly in our user scoring. It's about preventative maintenance of properties, especially boiler maintenance, as those carry a lot of the cost in maintenance issues. I think a lot of obviously maintenance work is extremely reactive, as can be expected. There are some interesting ways that when you gather enough data, whether that's about the boiler make or installation, or about things like the age of property, EPC ratings, and etc. So gathering lots of data will allow you to build like a huge database filled with lots of information, where you can teach models to learn when when problems usually arise. So then that can be applied to live environments. So this opportunity would be about kind of creating this huge database, teaching it on past historic issues when they arose, what were the reasons, and then it can then begin to spot when these things might happen again. A great example of this could be if you've installed loads of boilers, 100 boilers into 100 properties at the same time, and then one there's a fault in one. This database would alert that there's a higher risk that all the others, the 99 others, might have a fault in the next specific time period. So it would alert that, it would give a risk rating, and then boroughs can kind of make a decision on whether they have capacity to send people out to ensure those other boilers are not prone to faults, and that will allow you to spot risks before they arise. Should we go on to the next one? I'm just conscious of time. I'll do these quite fast. This one was another very big user problem, which is mold and damp detection. Obviously, there's an increasing backlog of maintenance work on damp and mold, and sort of new regulations in place on solving mold and damp issues at speed. Again, this would utilize gathering lots and lots of data. And this doesn't have to just be sort of sensors in place. This can be, you can create quite interesting, and people have done and then are exploring ways to do this, classification models where you train and gather as much data about properties that are more likely to gain damp and mold issues. And that can be from things like, local humidity sensors, but also knowing a lot about the age of properties, when they were last refurbished. It can be gathering information from images provided by tenants. So sort of utilizing numerous data sources and compiling them in one large sort of database that it can again flag risk ratings. And again, what I think is quite important with all 3 of these opportunities, the one previously, this one, and the next one, is they are longer term opportunities. They would take quite a lot of data gathering and data gathering at scale for models to learn when these issues arise and how when that risk rating is appropriate to be flagged. And then the next opportunity was also extremely high scoring and was also probably the most feasible tech-wise, but would take a longer time to see results on. This is rolling out lots and lots of smart sensors. And I know LOTI are beginning some work on rolling out smart sensors for the mold and damp issues as well, and are piloting those sort of solutions. But in terms of this smart sensors, you can have, a whole wealth of different types of smart sensors, whether that's smart meters and energy monitors. You can have leak sensors, temperature and humidity sensors, and these can all gather insights for things like tackling damp and mold, or looking at, energy consumption, that sort of thing. And I think the main aspect of this opportunity, because a lot of people are aware of smart sensors, is them needing to be rolled out at scale, to be gathering lots and lots of information live and to be learning from historic data, but also being able to use the information and the data gathered from these sensors to build a sort of classification risk database that would be able to flag for the housing maintenance team when a specific risk might arise. And that would be like a longer term opportunity because you need a lot more data, but could also, in the short term, provide a risk rating where it flags when issues could arise. But in the long term, once there is more confidence in the model's ability, it can automate things like, shutting down water when there's enough detection of a water leak. So there's like lots of scale for these sort of opportunities, which I think is quite important to note. Great. So the last slide is just a list of all the opportunities all together. And I think we'd be really interested to hear from you which one of these stood out to you most. If you could pop the number of the opportunity in the chat. Did any of them seem, like it would excite you most or have the greatest impact in your organization? Was it mold and damp detection and predictive forecasting, number 5, or optimizing resource planning and forecasting risks? So yeah, would be really interested if you could pop your number in the chat so we can see which ones might excite you most in your organization. Number 5, definitely. I think a lot of the sort of preventative gathering insights before problems become real problems is a really exciting opportunity in this space. So yeah, interesting to see those crop up a lot. Amazing. Thank you so much for putting your thoughts in the chat. That's really, really appreciated. I think they do broadly also align with how the wider stakeholders scored these opportunities as well. So I'm glad that there's also more than one that interests people. So that's really exciting. Great. Thank you so much.
Great. So thank you, Thais. We ended the report and wanted to share some high-level recommendations with you all. So we've got, 9 recommendations that these kind of really cut across all the opportunities and will help you get started on your AI journey. So and not just do it, but do it right, I suppose. So number 1 is to solve user problems. So obviously we all know that AI is currently in the hype cycle, but really the most valuable thing is to consider AI opportunities in the context of real problems that need new in kind solutions. So real user problems. So you can start by looking at problems that exist despite your latest software upgrades, and problems that are costly to resident outcomes and operational efficiency, because no matter how shiny the AI is, if a problem isn't solved, it's money wasted. Start small, do something, learn and iterate. So this is a sort of broad digital and software development piece of advice, but absolutely applies to AI as well. The opportunities and risks are best learned by doing. So we can write all the papers in the world, we can put steering committees together, but actually it's not until you start experimenting and start actually building something small that you will actually learn about what the opportunities and risks are. So put a squad together, pick a problem, talk to users, ideate on AI solutions, and then test something. I'm not going to go through all of these, but they are in detail in the report. I think the interesting one is becoming more informed and more demanding buyers of technology. So we think that for real change to happen, we must demand more from our technology suppliers. For example, we should be demanding that source code should be open for the wider local government community to access and build on. Data should be interoperable where possible. Roadmaps should be transparent for these services that we're buying, and also local authorities should get involved in beta testing new technology and new features as well. So there's a real interesting partnership that you can develop with your suppliers. Another interesting one is probably around investing and improving the quality of your data. So we really think this is a no regret move, because AI capability is advancing at a very high speed, but usable solutions still need good quality data. So data that's reliable and trustworthy, consistent, up-to-date, clean, and comprehensive. And so investing in improving and gathering data and improving the quality of your existing data will give you a head start and unlock adoption of new technologies. And then the last one I'd probably point out is not to skip discovery. So the best technology is informed by robust user research that surfaces real problems that real users are facing. So it doesn't matter if your solution is resident facing or back office. Having face-to-face inquisitive conversations with those who will ultimately use the technology and those who will be funding it is critical. And we've observed that skipping this step almost always results in building the wrong thing. So there we go. I think we are, we're probably at a good time to start the discussion. I've seen lots of comments in the chat as well. So yeah, really happy to take any questions. We'd be interested in what you'd like more information on. We'd love to hear if your borough has been conducting any interesting AI experiments. Also, any deployment implication or risks that you'd like to discuss more as well. Anything that might be interesting to you.
Thank you very much, both. I think from our side in LOTI, really appreciate all of the work and the resources that you've created for us as a community, as a sector, and I think will be a fantastic foundation for some of the innovation that we're trying to do. I'll just put in a second, actually, in the chat, a link to the actual resource on the LOTI website of the report, so people can jump in and have a deep dive there after the call. But I just wanted to mention a little. Well, if there are any questions that you saw that you wanted to in the chat that you wanted to respond to, but one of the questions, a couple of questions around the actual boroughs and the officers involved and who is involved in terms of the exploration bit and the prioritization bit. And I think I just wanted to comment on that from my perspective from LOTI. I think it was definitely apparent that when you have officers who are who are prioritizing cases based off impact, I think given the nature of the financial challenges that are facing them in their jobs and their daily things and the pressures and the money saving that they have to make and that sort of thing, that there was, I think, a large focus on things that were easily imaginable, where the actual impact you could easily imagine. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, and given the context, but I definitely think there are also some potential opportunities that we mapped out but might not always have been prioritized really highly, that could be future opportunities, or might be things that maybe even didn't come out of the user research. And I think the nature of having the prioritization done by officers often in the front line did sort of lead to some of those outcomes being prioritized, which I think was interesting, but also sort of a feature of the type of research and how we did it. Were there any, I don't know, Nima, you mentioned that you've done some work, Nima Karshenas in the chat. I don't know if you're comfortable sharing any of that.
Yeah, we've just done, well, every year we run a project with the Imperial students. And this year we sort of gave them a use case of doing that that summarization task. And yeah, I mean, they've only just finished the work, so I'm looking to put something together to sort of talk about the outcomes. But it was just sort of creating a prototype, creating the back end, front end, and like managing the data flows. So yeah, some good outcomes.
And Daniel.
I just wanted to promote the work of our data and insight team, because they've done a lot around predictive analysis for damp and mold. And the machine learning tool that they've implemented is taking the results back from residents. So it's trying to work out, based on whether they say yes or no, what the chances are for the rest of the data set as well. So we're not looking at the 19,000 households and saying that's it for everybody. As it's getting new data from the residents, it's actually saying, oh, you've said you've got damp and mold and these are your circumstances. these other people have those circumstances too. So it's more likely that they have them. The only thing I'd say is obviously resources are limited. So the idea that we could deal with 8,000 or 9,000 yeses from that, it just couldn't happen. So we kind of had to stage things based on priorities. So people with multiple priorities in terms of disabilities or having children or being elderly, they went to the top of the list, and then other people got a lower priority on that. So there's things to think about how to organise it, but also make sure that whatever you're doing is learning from what's happening.
Thank you. Can I come to some of the questions in the chat? As I've responded to a few, but not all. There was a few about who was involved and sort of the nature of the project. A part of me feels I shouldn't share the exact boroughs that were involved because it was such a small number, and some of the user interviews were quite personal, re the pain points, and I feel like it may identify the people we spoke to, and we did want to keep it very like anonymous. So I may avoid that, but it was a small number, and we are conscious of that. Because it was very much not a sort of quantitative research study. But Sam, Sona, do come in if you disagree with me trying to be too anonymous about it all. But yeah, definitely there are limitations with the fact that we were only able to speak to a small number of people and only a few boroughs. But so I wanted to come in on that. And yes, so I responded that some of the people who scored the opportunities were the people we spoke to in the interviews, but we didn't get them all to score because of capacity and the time we had for that. So that was also a consideration. And there was also a question about whether we spoke to the end with residents at all, and we did not. And that would be a really, really interesting study in its own. Capacity, but yeah, no, we did not have capacity to do that, sadly. But I think that would be really interesting. And obviously, if you are rolling out or even trialing any type of AI opportunity, there needs to be extensive user research with the end resident, because they might have very different views of their pain points, their own things that they are looking for. So I think that's really, really important. And then there was a few questions re the scope and us not covering homelessness. And that was directly intentional to not be part of the scope, because I think there could be a whole research body done on that topic. So we mainly focused on maintenance issues. However, there was a question about whether we spoke about applications to join the housing register. And I was wondering, Sona, if you could come in on that was something that you explored a little bit as well.
Yes, that's right. So I used to do a bit of work on social housing data returns and a digital service for that at the Department for Levelling Up. And we did some really interesting actually housing officer interviews, but really observing them in their context. This was pre-COVID actually. And I sat in on a lot of I can't remember what they're called now, but the meeting where the tenant picks up the keys essentially from the housing officer. And so there was that resident kind of interface there, and we learned a lot about how hard it is to, well, we learned a lot about the choice-based letting system, but also about the whole allocation process and how the sort of reasonable priority thing is it can vary across different local authorities, and making sure that the right people get into the right homes and that those families can actually sustain their tenancies is the kind of overall objective of housing teams. And so we have an idea in the report, which was not, it didn't come out of the user research, it was more of a sort of desk research based idea, which was around using AI to match the right homes with the right households. And so tenants would still be able to register their interest on the choice-based letting systems, but the properties that they can bid for or that become available to them are much more suitable for their needs. So it might be due to their household size, their any disability needs, you know, any preferences they have, their homelessness status or their reason for coming into social housing. Just making sure that the right properties get matched with the right families, and then the families can then go ahead and do the bidding process. So there is an idea in the report around that. Yeah, an AI-based matching service essentially. Any thoughts on something like that would be really interesting. But I think that goes more into the kind of allocation and housing register space than the property maintenance side of things. Great. Any other questions? Thank you for both the folks who shared what's going on in their own local authorities as well. That's really interesting.
I'm just seeing some more questions on why maintenance was the prime focus. And I think Sam, do come in on any of this, but I think because rough sleeping and homelessness obviously is one of the largest pressures faced in the provision of housing, it would require its own research. And I think, you know, a whole research report and study on AI opportunities there would be amazing and something of huge interest. So I think it was purely out of, you know, tightly scoping and capacity. But I will copy into the chat the rough sleeping insights project that faculty have done alongside LOTI into the chat as well. Some really interesting work that we did last year and have been rolling out as well on that topic. So there's some definitely interesting insights in there as well.
Yeah, I was also just reading the point from Victoria about how it's rare that you'd need the consent of individuals to use the data, though you may allow people to choose whether they're part of the pilot, and instead having high transparency about what data is collected and what it's used for. I think that's a really interesting point. And again, I've seen that even in some of the data returns that local authorities have to do to central government, yeah, it's less about asking for consent and more just, like you say, being transparent about why you're collecting the data and where it's going to end up. And almost like that opt-in sort of approach or opt-out approach, I guess. But oh, I can't remember what my second point was going to be. It's completely gone out of my head. But yeah, completely agree that that's definitely an approach that you can take. Oh, I know, remember what it was. So I know that some research from government around data sharing across departments has shown that citizens actually expect government to be sharing data, and so when it's not shared, they're actually surprised, and they sort of. Yeah, I mean, this was very central government focused, but I think the same would apply for local government as well. Is, you know, don't ask me for the same information twice. Like, I'm telling you once, use my data efficiently, and you know, make sure that I get the services that I need as quickly as possible. So just an interesting observation there around user expectations of how government uses data.
There was also an interesting question in the chat, which asks, do you see these AI opportunities as being driven from the local authority or the contractor? So part of the contract the London Authority has with them. Contractor more likely to have a bigger data set across multiple clients for things like specific boiler models and common maintenance issues. I think that's a really, really interesting point. And that was one of our recommendations, was about working with contractors and really ensuring that that relationship can be beneficial for both the contractor and for the local authority. But that's, I think a lot of the time it can be driven by the contractor, but also the local authority will also have quite a lot of interesting data and opportunities there to use. So I think it's about finding the balance between, and definitely faculty has done some interesting projects with contractors that work with London authorities in their own capacity, I think more on the adult social care side. And they definitely do have a wealth of data and information there to play around with. So, and to gather insights from, etc. So I think it's often about weighing up who can carry that burden and drive forward. But yeah. So do come in.
Yeah, I had a question, which I mean, I suppose I know the answer to because I've read the reports and there's a very good section in it, but it was just in terms of actually developing projects and prototypes and actually the approach to moving from these being ideas to actually tangible things. What would your advice be in terms of the best steps for local authorities, given our own constraints around skills and capabilities and data and money is a big one? What would your advice be?
I would probably say, and this was one of the recommendations actually, is to, I guess, see where there is data that can be used, and that, you know, if you have a fairly good data set that can be sort of experimented with, and if you can apply a sort of user problem or find a user problem that that data is concerned with, and sort of take an experimental approach to starting with AI. Sort of, yeah, that idea of like do some research, identify some opportunities, see if you have the data available, like use that prioritization matrix of like value and feasibility, and then just pick one thing and sort of try something. And I think it's difficult because I know local authorities don't always have the skills in-house to start on technical work. But I think it's worth sort of using the network, you know, talk to other local authorities, see if you can pair up with another local authority to do something. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say talk to faculty because that's far too far too pluggy. But there are, you know, I think there are, and even your supplier, you know, your supplier is your resource for technical solutions. So, and they'll have developers and potentially machine learning engineers who could potentially advise you and help you with anything that you want to try and experiment with. Don't know if Tarek or Thais, you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I mean, this makes me think a lot of local authorities are already doing some very interesting experimental work and sharing their findings. And this made me think with a lot of boroughs are doing some interesting work on identifying HMOs and using huge amounts of data and lots of wealth and resource about that to kind of build out quite interesting and experimental ways of identifying these homes of multiple occupancy. So it's sort of sharing the learnings there, and also I think adopting like quite an agile approach in a lot of these projects where it's very iterative. It's trialing, it's testing small things before you try and sort of do something absolutely huge. So yeah, that really comes to mind as like an interesting experimental bit of work that we came across. But there's lots of interesting trials. Megan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, and just being like a ex-local digital advocate, it's coming together, and obviously LOTI can help with that to bid for funding. Hopefully with the new government, we'll start to see more kind of like not just AI funding, but again, digital funding, whether that be from now MACRG, other government departments might be an interesting space to explore. And so they don't have to use council money, that it's coming from central government or another body to help with some of those funding pressures that we are well aware of. Or also, and I know again, LOTI has done this with their members, is there's again something that you all want to kind of work on that can come together and then share the output, whether it's code or like modules or usable kind of like components is another way again that's come, you know, that we've learned work from a LOTI and local digital perspective. So some suggestions there that might be helpful on the budget front.
I don't know if anyone else had any questions, but I just wanted to sort of double down that from the LOTI perspective. Someone's put their hand up. I will, yeah, just to mention. So I think this is from our side. These reports, I guess, really meant to kick off conversation and thinking about what might be some of the opportunities, and some of them, I know there are things that maybe boroughs have already started on their journey in one or two of these areas, but if there are any opportunities that any of our LOTI members do think it might be an interesting way of approaching if we worked on that in a more collaborative way with multiple boroughs, then this is kind of the opportunity, I think, where we wanted to scope out the appetite for that. So please do reach out to me over the course of the summer. We'll be having some conversations about this internally with our members over the next couple of months about that. I think someone might have raised their hand, but they might have put it down again, which is very much allowed. I'm not going to put someone on the spot, but was there anything else, Sonia or Thais, from your side? Any takeaways, any last messages, I suppose, when it came to having done the research and having looked at it, and from your perspective, that would be your sort of your key message for people to take back to their own work?
I think one from me is two key takeaways, if I may. One was doing a lot of the user research was really, really fascinating, and it highlighted to me just how much amazing work local authorities are already doing in this space and thinking about really interesting problems and ways to kind of tackle them or kind of ameliorate them. So it was really sort of quite inspiring actually talking to some really amazing people focusing on some of these issues. And the second one was also, as part of the user research, we then spoke to Tarek, one of our data scientists on the faculty side, to develop these opportunities. And it was really, really exciting to think about just the sheer amount of data and the very innovative opportunities that we could develop. And it was sort of uncovering lots of new ideas and data that you would never even consider could be appropriate for an opportunity, but there's just there's such a wealth of things that you can gather and start with. So that was really, really exciting. So I don't know, Sam, if you have anything else.
No, I guess it just off the back of what you said, Thais, it does sound like we are in a time in this journey where there is about to be a lot of data becoming available through these sensors and through IoT. And I just think it's like, keep your finger on the pulse on those things, and take part in trials and the rollouts of this technology if you can, as a borough, and yeah, just continue along that journey, because that's going to, having access to that data is going to be the thing that unlocks a lot of these opportunities. So I think that's the really exciting kind of breakthrough. Tarek, anything from you?
I mean, I guess very quickly, it was really interesting to try to, translate all of these opportunities and all of these pain points, translate them into technical solutions that we feel like are technically sound and feasible, but also something that's maybe inspiring or that would be really helpful for people working with this stuff. Like, I think we, as data scientists, like we tend to get stuck into the day-to-day and like, oh, we need good data and oh, we need to make sure that everything is clean, whatever. But at the same time, it's important to keep the bigger picture of the impact the AI can have on local authorities or government in general. So I guess that's my key takeaway from this.
Brilliant. Well, I just want to say thank you again, faculty colleagues, for all your work and presenting your work. I think, yeah, fantastic and a really, really useful resource for our community. As I said at the top of the webinars, we'll be sharing the video for this, the recording, also the report, and the link itself I already put in the chat, but the link again is on the LOTI website, and I have a blog up today looking at this and also simultaneously looking at the report that faculty colleagues were helping with in adult social care as well. The webinar for that is on Monday afternoon. So if you haven't registered to that, you can find the links out on the LOTI website in our events section, or on Ticket Tailor on the LOTI profile. Very easy to find, or on our Basecamp if you're in our Basecamp. So hopefully see some of you for that. Otherwise, thank you again, everyone, for joining, and thank you again, faculty colleagues, for all of your work.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.